Hi guys, I'm Shmi and you join me on another winter's day in London, Christmas time. So I will be honest with you, I'm not really going too far away from home. I'm spending the time with my family, but today, having not driven the 675 LT Spider in a short little while, I wanted to take it out, just keep it running, and basically shoot another Fuel for Thought video. I'm quite enjoying this series. I'm getting lots of ideas from you guys about what you'd like to hear me talk about, and I've not yet filmed one driving, well, the flagship of my supercar collection, the McLaren 675 LT Spider. Most recent was in my dad's V12 Vantage, which I really enjoyed taking out for a little drive as well when I was out with my parents. I've shot videos in the Focus RS, the Mini, the FF, not in the Cayman GT4 because I've just sold it, of course. I'm sure it won't be that long until I'm shooting one in the GT8 and maybe some other cars in the future. But today, the topic I really wanted to talk to you about, as you kind of already know from the title, of course, is what goes into maintaining and running a sort of fleet or garage or collection of multiple supercars, because I think there's probably an awful lot more to it than you perhaps don't realise. And the very first one, outside of the obvious, the storage, the maintenance, the insurance, and the costs of it all, and we'll go down that route a little bit, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, is keeping them all running. And I guess part of the very reason I'm driving the LT Spider right now is that I haven't taken it out for a drive in what must be 2 weeks maybe? I'm not quite sure if it's entirely that long, 10 days. But the reality is, if you leave this kind of car sat for too long, they get problems, electrical gremlins, the engines need to be run, batteries, you all know about batteries, and they're not cheap, especially lightweight batteries like in this. Now the McLarens are pretty good, and even in the sports series, they actually tell you how long the battery has to go, how long you can leave it parked for, and I noticed in the 540C that I drove in Dubai, it was happy with sort of 50 days. So you can leave it parked for a long time. But my general view is you want to keep things going, you want to keep the tyres rotating, you want to keep the brakes from sticking, you want the engine to be running and go through a decent cycle. And I don't mean just sit in the garage and start the thing up, because yes, that gives it a little bit of battery juice, but it doesn't help with anything else. So you need to take each car out. So if you get into a car collection, let's say I've taken delivery of the GT8 already, I haven't at the time I'm filming this video, but 5 cars. So the 675 LT Spider, the GT8, and the FF. These are all sort of, well, bespoke, handmade supercars. These are the kind of cars you want to keep running and keep them up and going. The Focus RS, obviously you'd hope it would do its thing. It's a modern Ford. The Mini, it's a classic. It's an older car. It needs some looking after. So each of the big three have the same sort of characteristics that, yes, you could plug them in on a trickle charger, but as it happens, my garage doesn't have trickle charger points, so I don't have access to electricity to keep the batteries refreshed and conditioned. Most of these cars come with the trickle chargers, so they're not a difficult thing to get hold of. They're not too expensive anyway, but in my circumstances, I don't even have the ability to use them. So for me, to keep the batteries going, I've got to start these up and run them, and really I want to do it every week or two. And I have some friends that can come around and help me out, but typically that means I've got to keep and maintain a diary in my head of when each car was last driven and make sure they don't sit for too long. Otherwise I might end up in the situation I had with the FF about, what, 6 months ago, where it was sat in my garage, sans battery power. And it was rather flat and dead to the world and wouldn't start. And being a car with a massive 6.3 litre V12, it's not quite so easy to start. You can't just jump it off a single vehicle. I had to call out the RAC, Ferrari's partner of course, and then jump in, bring it back to life. So maintaining them, the main thing is keeping these cars driven and running. And something I'm very conscious about is my trips abroad, and growing my car collection with more cars means it's even harder to find the time to drive them all. And I'm very aware, and I apologise for this, that it's very much a first world problem, but it is a challenge that you have to overcome with running a supercar fleet. So that's the first thing. Second thing, let's talk about garage spaces. I choose to live in central London, where garage spaces come at a premium and are not so desperately readily available. I'm fortunate enough that in my building, I live in an apartment building with a communal underground garage, sort of 6 floors of underground underneath the building. There are enough spare spaces that I can find people, other tenants, other apartment owners in the building who I can rent the spaces directly. So I have different arrangements. They vary between 100 and I guess £250 a month. And I rent enough spaces, I can alternate my spaces. I have 4 permanently, because typically one car is away somewhere. Either I've left it in another country, it's an event, or it's in for service or something. So I'm spending still a fair amount of money on garage space, and I've thought about obviously moving out of London, but to me as a young guy, I like being in the centre of the city. It's very easy to get to the various airports for all the trips I'm doing, so that's an expense I don't necessarily mind, but I've got to worry about which cars go in which spaces, because getting down the ramps into my garage, for example, there's no way the GT8 can get down to the bottom, so I have to be conscious of where everything is parked. We'll talk about insurance. I went into insurance a little bit in my first video, what it costs to own a Ferrari in the FF, because insurance is something that varies massively depending who you are, where you live, what country you're in, your cars, the terms of your policy, the miles you want to do, your named drivers, all sorts of things. My policy with a company called Tollgate, I work very closely with them, talk about everything I'm doing with my cars. Obviously you see that I name a lot of my friends to drive my cars for different trips and things, and I don't want to stop that at all, so I really enjoy that ability, and obviously I pay a little bit more for that. But realistically, to insure my fleet of 5 cars, we're talking somewhere near to £1 million worth of value, and realistically you're going to be looking at 1–1.5% of your total garage value. So my cars are changing all the time, but on a large fleet it comes down to what the values are, so that's about where we're talking. A percent of the value, you can do some maths. We're pretty close to a 5-figure annual insurance policy. It's worth it for the opportunities. Of course, you have to have insurance as a legal requirement, as well as making sure you have a good policy if the worst should ever happen. Let's hope it never does. So what other costs do we have? Servicing, things like the Ferrari, it has 2 years warranty and 7-year service pack, so even though the car's coming up for 5 years old, it's still got a while to go. This car has a couple of New Year's warranty on it. It will need a service every year or 10,000 miles. That could be £1,500–2,000. I'm not entirely sure because I've not had to do it on an LT yet. The GT8, again, 1 year, I expect that will be pretty similar to V8 Vantage at the end of the day, maybe £1,000 a year, but 10,000 miles. The GT4 actually was 2 years or 18,000 miles, but I only owned it for, was it 13–14 months, so we didn't get that far. Focus RS, I don't even know what the service schedule is on the Focus RS, but I'm doing an awful lot of miles on it, so it's probably going to come up quite soon. And the Mini, again, I guess is probably every year, but that won't be expensive. That will be £200 or something. The Focus RS probably pretty similar. So this is again something you have to think about, the annual rotation, because cars all have different registration dates. So I've got this really complicated spreadsheet with lists of when the older ones have to have their MOTs, when the insurance contracts are due for renewal, when their next services are coming around, when I've got to buy their next tax discs, because of course tax is a pretty big thing. You need your road tax. Here in the UK, on a brand new high performance car, you're looking at £1,000 a year. It goes down to 500 second year, although it's all changing from, I think it's March. The whole system changes, so I need to look up and learn how all of that works. But all of these kind of things have to be thought about in a really big way, and when the AMG GTR is here as well, and I'm up to 6 cars, and then when inevitably something else is here, because I'm a bit addicted to this game, and it becomes 7, and then maybe in the future when it's the Ford GT and it becomes 8, this is going to get an awful lot harder, and I'm definitely going to need a little bit of help getting it all sorted. And i8 coming the other way. It's a bit plain in silver though, to be honest. I prefer it in brighter colours. Yeah, there's an awful lot to think about. Need a bit of help doing it, and getting cars and getting them picked up. So maybe, and this is something I keep referring to, maybe at some point I'll be able to get a sort of a facility, a location where I can have the cars all together on trickle chargers, and maybe have somebody looking after them, maybe even open it up to events or meetings or things. We'll have to see, I guess, what options are on the cards in due course. So I think my point is there's a lot to think about. You know, I know a lot of people obviously with really nice collections of cars, and as soon as basically people reach 10 cars, you have to hire somebody to look after them, because these kind of cars are fussy. The Focus RS is easy. I wouldn't expect that to have any problems. But these kind of cars, they are hand built. You need to look after them, you need to treat them with respect, and you need to be careful with them. So you do need to make sure, you know, if you think something's wrong, you need to get it to a dealer and get it looked at. Obviously think about the power, track days. The last thing you want is to be in a position where something pretty dangerous can happen. And then actually, you know what, also, tyres. I've got this stockpile of tyres in my garage, because for this car I've got regular P0s and I've got the Pirelli Trofeo track tyres. For the FF I've got P0 and Winter Soto Zeros. For the Focus RS I've got Pilot Super Sports and Pilot Alpine's winter tyres. The Mini obviously just has its one set of Yokos. Oh, bright sun, and now I get to use the sun visor that in the McLaren is next to useless, so I have to sit with my head up like this. What else what have I missed? The GT8. I'll keep that on the Michelin Sport Cup 2s, which are like a sporty road tyre, quite a hardcore road tyre, but I'm not going to drive that car in bad weather, because let's face it, I'm not necessarily too worried about me doing something stupid, but if somebody else were to hit me, carbon fibre body from Canada, that's not something that's easy to replace or repaint, especially not to the quality that Aston Martin do it. So there's a lot to think about here, a lot to work out, and I mean, something like the AMG GTR, I expect that's going to be a car that I can drive out of the box and it's going to perform perfectly. It is German, the GT4 has done for me over the year I've owned it, but with everything else more or less, there's a lot of thinking about it, and a lot of, you've got to be careful where you park them. I enjoy driving the Focus RS all the time at the moment because it's a lot of fun to drive and it doesn't come with a lot of the stress. For example, if I donked off the carbon mirror on here, it's going to be quite an expensive thing, whereas the Focus RS, I mean, it's not going to be cheap, but it's the Focus RS, it's not a McLaren, and it's significantly easier to repair. There's a bigger dealer network, there are dealers everywhere, and that's actually, I guess, another relevant thing, which is the McLaren dealers, Ferrari dealers, Aston Martin dealers aren't on every street corner, so you have to work a little bit harder to find one to get things looked after. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's an interesting one just to tell you a bit more about something you probably haven't necessarily thought about. It looks all so easy, you just buy the car, stick it in your garage, magic, everything happens. But there are lots of costs involved. Garaging, servicing, insurance, just making sure everything's out and about and running as it should. But equally, it's an awful lot of fun, and I'm not going to pretend for a second I don't enjoy it. I very much like the logistics side. I think I've always been a bit of a geek at heart of this kind of thing, so I really enjoy kind of working it all out and keeping it all running, and making sure everything's in absolute tip-top shape where possible. So I've pretty much done a good 2 or 3 miles driving in the car, just nothing hardcore, just keeping it running, keeping the fluids flowing, ready for another trip away, because I seem to do these non-stop at the moment. Shooting all of this content for you guys, it's been a particularly busy period, and yeah, actually I think I'm probably uploading this at the very beginning of the new year, in which case I probably should have said Happy New Year to you all, and I'm very much looking forward to 2017, the adventures it's going to bring, and the things I'm going to be able to share with you during this year. So I hope you've had a brilliant winter holidays. I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you ever so much for watching, guys, as always, and if you have any ideas for future topics you'd like to hear me talk about in my Fuel for Thoughts videos, anything to do with owning these cars, specific questions, things you would like to know, just let me know in the comments down below, and I will do my best to pick the ones that come up quite regularly and come back to you with a little bit more detail and some answers. But I'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I will catch up with you again very soon. Cheers.